this is video 2 of the wiring harness install. Basically, in the last video I showed you, how I had it all laid out. Now in this video I'm going to start off with basically all the engine compartment, wiring plugs and getting those all hooked up. I'll show you how that looks and we'll go from there. So, engine bay connections. This is not going to be an exhaustive list or video because there's just so many points, it's hard to go over them all. But starting on the passenger side, basically there are two starter connectors, a ground and a power. Those will come off of the, I'll call it the battery loom. Basically going from the battery up to the starter and alternator. Also down below here, I don't know if you can see them, they're kind of tight in there, but there is a alternator wire there and then a plug down there for the alternator. Then attached to that is your fuse box. There will be all these connectors here to go into the fuse box. Now, that fuse box basically gives the power to your main wiring harness, which is the thick one that runs here and runs underneath your dash. Once you have that done there, then basically on this side you're going through and hooking up couple of ground connections on the main harness here. It's going to run forward and go to your I don't know what you call this here. There's your idle air intake, which is down below the throttle body there, and then the throttle body was this throttle position sensor. That's right. That will need to be plugged in as well, and then also your injector for your fuel injectors and your coil pack plug. Then going over to the driver's side of the engine bay, you'll have your mass airflow sensor. Once again, this is a 1992 Miata. There is a 1.8 BP Mazda engine in here. I've done the conversion. Another thing I actually just thought of, there is an oil pressure sensor right next to the oil filter down below there. I can't get the camera in there to show you guys. Then basically you'll have your O2 sensor connection here. Mass airflow sensor. There's also some coolant sensors, fan controls, coolant sensors, things like that I don't have plugged up yet. They're not needed to start. Also your low brake fluid sensor. And I think, roughly off the top of my head, I think that does it for the engine compartment. Next we're going to move back to the fuel tank, the rear part of the car. Basically the only thing you're going to need to hook up here is your plug for your power to your fuel pump. There's also a ground back here, a multi-loom ground here that you'll need to ground out for those to work. Also, since this is toward the rear of the car, go over to the battery side, basically hook up your main ground. I just have it loosely hooked to the clamped to the frame, all the grounds right now, as I will not be mounting those yet. So main ground strap there from the battery, and then your battery positive, battery negative, of course, hooked up. And I have this zip tied up because I have a short somewhere in this wire here, and it's able to turn on if the battery cable's in that position. And I believe that does it for the rear of the car. Okay, now moving on to the hardest part of the wiring with the most connections, that is, we'll call it the engine compartment. Another thing I missed in I'll call it the passenger compartment wiring here. Another thing I missed here is grounding strap from the head to the frame. I just have it mounted to the side of the cam angle sensor. Sorry, that's another thing that you got to plug in up here. But basically have that grounded to the frame rail there. And then moving down here, you got to plug your ECU in, of course. The two biggest plugs, pretty easy there. A couple more little ground wires here to ground out. Then moving on to this mess. Basically this part is the wiring loom to the rear of the car for the fuel pump and taillights. In here you have a multi ground location here to make sure to ground out. Relay box, diagnosis box, things like that are on the front. But underneath here, normally there is a clutch, I think it's an interlock switch here. Mine did not have any wires. I tried putting those in here. That didn't work out. Mine's actually, I found 2 wires up by, and that was my trouble with starting, up in the front there. I took the switch off, wired them in up there, and the car started. So, yeah, not sure why that's the case, but it is what it is for now. So underneath here, basically you have a multi-loom ground that I don't have connected, but the car will start with that. As well as basically the main parts are all your dash plugs here. There's a main loom coming out of your what would you call it, steering column here, as well as a plug into your steering column up here. These are your main ignition wires that go into the back of the ignition switch. And let me think of everything else up here. Basically, just, if you labeled everything, you'll know right where it goes. There's only one way a connector, most of these connectors will go into another connector, so it's pretty easy to figure out. Once you have those plugged in, you should be able to turn your dash on, and of course see your nice check engine lights and everything like that, but be able to see the indicators on the dash to know that you have power running to that. And I think that really about does it for all of the wiring on the car and the plugs and connectors. I'm sure I'm missing many things, but hopefully that just gives you guys a overall feel for what you have to do for the first start. If you'll notice here, I just have the looms loosely laid everywhere, and they're really just kind of sitting there. That's enough to get the car started right now. Next plan is rebuilding the whole harness. So basically that's it for this video. I hope that kind of sheds a little light, like I said, for you guys on what you got to do. I'm sure I missed a lot of stuff. Sorry I couldn't go into more detail. It's just was very confusing when I was doing it. Just a lot to absorb and a lot to handle. But basically laying the loom out like this will get you going in the right spot. Next video finally is time for starting up the motor. So thanks for watching, guys. See you on the next video. Please subscribe and like down below if the video helped you out. I'd appreciate it. Thank you.